Alex, those are some of just the moments that stood out to me, both as outstanding questions, but also as big points in the summations. What stood out to you?
Many things. The first I will tell you is having gone to court today for the first time and hearing the voices of the lawyers was actually something. We obviously don't have audio of this trial, but hearing Todd Blanche, who had a scattershot defense, a scattershot closing arguments. He does not vocally command the room. He does not speak with great authority.
He looks like a tough guy, but he talks like Jared.
He
talks like Jared Kushner.
And it was notable that when he finally finished his argument, he sat down and he's sitting right next to Donald Trump, next to him, Rachel. And Trump is looking that way, and Blanche is looking this way, right? That's not the body language.
He sits down at the end of his summation, and they both...
And Trump is looking that way, and Blanche is looking this way. That is not the body language of someone who's necessarily happy with the job their lawyer has done. And remember that at the end of Blanche's closing argument, there was a lot of back and forth with Judge Merchan about Todd Blanche's, plea to the jury not to send Donald Trump to jail. That was something that was stricken from the record. There was a kind of a whole kerfuffle. So that was not great for Todd Blanche, in addition to a series of fairly wild assertions, some of which you pointed out. One of my favorite ones was the excuse that there was no other way to categorize an invoice from a lawyer to the president than other than a legal expense. It was a drop-down menu. It was the only choice that they had at the Trump organization. That's all they could do, which clerically may make a lot of sense. Legally, I'm not sure. Their assertion that every campaign is a conspiracy here in the United States, Rachel, something I did not know. It's a group of people working together to help someone win. All campaigns are conspiracies. Tell the Biden campaign. The Access Hollywood thing was no big deal. Quote, this stuff happens all the time in campaigns. It's not a doomsday event. Sure felt like it to those of us watching on the outside. And then, of course, catch and kill is business as usual. This is not a crime. This is what happens in the media. And the National Enquirer, as you pointed out, is really just a zine. Nobody really reads the thing. It has no effect on an election. The idea that
every grocery store.
Who reads it?
These sophisticated men, it would be preposterous for them to think the National Enquirer would have an effect on the world. That's why he's the guy who owns the company that runs the National Enquirer. He knows it's pointless.
Which is in every grocery store, everywhere you go across America, too. I mean, I was also struck, because this is my first time sitting in the overflow room as well, by the voices. And Judge Merchan, who everybody who's gone to the courtroom has described as very calm, he has a very soothing voice, I found. Even when he was telling Todd Blanche that he was outrageous, and when he suggested that the jury could not find Trump guilty and send him to prison, which is, of course, way out of the bounds of what you're supposed to do as a lawyer, he was very calm. It was a little escalated, but he was quite calm. What struck me, not a lawyer, we'll leave that to you, Laurie, was kind of the storytelling. You've been talking about this over the last hour of the kind of, and the contrast between that. In many ways, it reminded me a little bit of like Trump versus the Democrats and how they communicate about things. Because the Todd Blanche's closing was very Trumpy, in my view. I mean, as you said, Alex, it was basically like, everything you think is wrong is totally normal. Every election is a conspiracy. Everybody's working with media to pay money to people who have bad stories about the candidates. Everybody is doing this. This is just common. He even said, retainer is just a word, right? These are, it's just, and so
it's a drop-down menu.
It's a drop-down. So you wonder, and to me, it reminded me of Crooked Joe and, or Crooked Joe and Crooked Hillary, and Corrupt Joe, right? This kind of message of like, everybody's bad, everybody's corrupt. We all do this stuff. Now, whether or not that's going to work with a jury of 12 men and women, that's a question none of us know the answer to. On the other side, you had Josh Steinglass, who was like, I want to be in a study group with him, first of all. But it was very methodical. It was very meticulous. It was maybe too detailed, as Ari said before. There were moments where sitting in there, you were kind of zoning in.
You were
and
like,
zoning
is
out.
Time a dimension? Are we still? Are we still there?
Were there moments when he looked essentially at his prepares material and like, let's skip this part? You guys are getting the point. I'm losing you.
It felt like an hour 4.5.
But he did say earlier in the day that it was going to be 4 to 4.5 hours, right? And it was, of course, longer.
He lied. Well, it wasn't that much longer. It was 4 hours and 40 minutes.
4 hours and 40 minutes. But he was on the top end of that. I think we can say.
On a lighter note, tell them about when he said it's only a third done.
Oh, wait.
That's when I fainted, so I don't remember.
There
You'll
was
have to tell me what
actually
happened.
one of the interesting things also sitting in the room with so many legal experts was that when he said 4 to 4.5 hours, there was an audible gasp in the room of the length of that, of how long that would be. Now, they can be as long as you want in state court, so he has every right to do that. And then when he said, I'm a third of the way through, there was another, like, in the room
when he had
as
already
well.
been going for hours.
When he'd been going for 2 hours at that point in time.
In terms of, Joy, talking about some of the points that these guys raised, I'm kind of stuck on the drop-down menu. So the drop-down menu is like, let me just tell me.
Sure.
It's hard to actually tell.
I was obsessed with the
I looked at
the
this part of the
explanation.
transcript, and it's sort of hard to tell from the transcript. So my impression from it, correct me if I'm wrong, because you guys were there to hear it, was that they were saying, effectively, yes, we may have booked these expenses at the Trump Organization in a way that was technically false, but we had no choice because the software was designed in such a way that it made us falsify.
Our hands were tied.
Yes,
Sure, conveniently.
Okay.
You know, I think the line that, and so this was all happening toward the end, halfway through my show, they were finishing. So we just kept on reading whatever was coming through the Google Doc that we're so blessed to have. And we're sort of reading it in real time with the wonderful Katie Fang there. And the line that really stood out to me from Joshua Steinglass, who seems to have done a fantastic job. This was a really strong prosecution team. I think we can all agree that they each were really good at the storytelling piece. But Joshua Steinglass says, use your common sense. Mm-hmm. The drop-down menu thing is a use your common sense moment because the challenge, and even the day I was there, this was a challenge I had with Todd Blanche, is that Todd Blanche is kind of all over the place, and he's kind of Muppety, and he's kind of Muppetizing all over the place, and he doesn't seem to be even satisfying Donald Trump with his lack of storytelling ability.
What does Muppetizing mean?
Meaning he's just flailing around like Kermit the Frog. Like I can almost see his string arms going as he's talking. He's string arming. You know, it doesn't make sense. And it's very all over the place. But the prosecution, to me, has done a good job overall in all of these days of this trial of telling you a very simple story. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense to you, I think Mr. Steinglass was saying, that cheap, micromanaging Donald Trump would pay Michael Cohen, who the other side says is a lying liar and a horrible person, just give him $35,000 because there's a drop-down menu that says the only way he can explain that is that it's a reimbursement. Say it's an NDA, but not really know any of that is happening and be completely unaware of it during a campaign to become president of the United States. That he knew nothing about it, even though he's a micromanager and cheap, and he gave away all that money. And then they've never really explained that other exhibit, which I think is the most damning exhibit, which is the handwritten notes. Yes. How do you explain why those pieces of those numbers are on that paper?
There's no defense explanation for those papers.
And they've never tried. And the thing that's been sort of shocking to me, and I know Todd Blanche is an experienced prosecutor, but as a defense attorney, they never even tried to explain that.
There was also all
tried.
these documents. I mean, there's this PowerPoint that was very poorly put together. Not that I'm a PowerPoint expert, but they had handwritten notes and a lot of these PowerPoint slides.
The defense did?
Which they didn't explain. I mean, they kind of flashed through, so you didn't see what was in each of them. But there were some of them that had a few handwritten notes on them as they went through the slides of the presentation. And he just skipped over them.
The jury to sort of digest them without walking them through
I think you're assuming that he was explaining each slide.
He wasn't.
And he was not.
There were exhibits placed for us to see.
For us to see.
The jury was not walked through them, which I don't think is a particularly effective defense strategy.
Well, and
That's
can
weird.
I just say, and I've never, obviously, I've never gotten through, I want to be on a jury so badly, but for some reason, judges don't want me. But I've been on a grand jury, and I can say in that kind of a situation, it may feel over-explained what Mr. Steinglass did with 4 hours, but I found that even in that kind of a process, the more detail, the better. And so I think the advantage the prosecution is going to have is when they explain the law, your feelings about Michael Cohen, even though they've now met Michael Cohen, he seemed perfectly reasonable on the stand, and he followed, but he was, respectful to the judge. They're going to be on the judge's side. The judge is your therapist. That's his voice, right? So I think the challenge is that when you get all that detail, and then the judge explains the law, all that jury is going to do in that room is they're going to compare the details that they've gotten from both the two sides to the law. And I still cannot tell you what the defense is against the actual legal claims against Donald Trump. Because if the first witness, Mr. Pecker, which is the day I was there for one of the 2 days of Mr. Pecker, he admitted it was a scheme to impact the election. Michael Cohen is on tape and admitted it was a scheme to impact the election and went to jail for that scheme. There's been no explanation of how Donald Trump could have not known that and how it was not a scheme. So the problem is when they look at the law and they look at the facts, I don't know where the defense is going to. They just need somebody to nullify, and I don't know how they do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, as Ari was arguing before, it is a hung jury approach from the defense rather than an acquittal approach. So they just need to get somebody to get stuck on one piece of the evidence. As a legal matter, though, there was a really, really, really dramatic moment with both of you guys just mentioned right before lunch, where the judge, hold on, oh, I just lost it.